Hey, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of Field Days, which is everything food plots, and this is our spring edition. We're talking all spring topics. Today's topic is a really exciting topic, at least in my opinion, and we're going to talk about frost seeding a perennial blend into an existing annual plot from the year before. Lots of guys have heard about frost seeding in the traditional manner where you're frost seeding a perennial plot, but today is something a little new. We've been doing it for 2 years and had great success, and we're going to talk you through all of that. I'm pleased to have a special guest here, Brandon Self from Whitetail Institute, who's worked for Whitetail Institute for over 14 years. He's as knowledgeable as anybody when it comes to food plots, so he's going to be our special guest. We hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the number 3 Field Days podcast. And today what we're talking about, again, is all spring-related food plot topics. Today's discussion, we talked in the last session about frost seeding an existing perennial plot with a perennial plot blend like Fusion or Clover. Today's topic is a really hot topic. We see a lot of guys asking questions about. It's become popular just in the last couple years. And I've myself only done it for a couple years now, but it is frost seeding a perennial blend like, clover or chicory or whatever into a plot that was an annual the year before, whether it was beets and greens, your turnips, your winter greens, whatever it was. Taking that plot's due for rotation, instead of having to go through and plant that plot in a perennial, you can sometimes do it simply by frost seeding, and that's what today's show is all about. I'm here with Brandon Self from Whitetail Institute, Director of Operations. Been with them for how many years?
14 years.
14 years. This guy is super, super knowledgeable when it comes to food plots, so we're happy to have him here today as a guest. And the first thing, let's start off with talking about, Brandon, if you can just explain to everybody, let's talk about the traditional definition of frost seeding, what traditionally we do. And again, we have a podcast all about more of the traditional type frost seeding before this. So if you're interested, listen to that one. Let's talk a little bit about that. And then what is frost seeding an annual plot, what today's topic's all about.
Yeah. Traditional frost seeding is frost seeding a perennial blend into an existing perennial crop. So you're trying to thicken up your existing perennial crop that you've had established already. The new idea of frost seeding a perennial into an annual from the year before would be, say, you planted a field of beets and greens, and the deer, just like your fields of beets and greens, the deer just ravished them.
Yep.
And, they're trampled the field down. It's just good exposed dirt with some stubble in it. And so this practice is taking that same perennial blend, clover, fusion, chick magnet, extreme, broadcasting it over the existing annual field. Well, it's not an existing annual field. That's where the confusion comes in. It's the previous year's annual field that's now gone.
Yep.
And so you're broadcasting that, trying to establish a perennial field without the ground preparation.
Correct. Yep. And, just, I guess, to touch on the traditional frost seeding, the reason you do that is to have that come in a little bit more lush, fill in bare spots, things like that. Traditionally, that's what frost seeding has been, where now we're talking about, we tell guys you should only plant your annuals 2 years, and I have a lot of plots where I've planted my annuals for 2 years. They're set to be rotated into a perennial. Well, man, I looked at this like, wow, if I can go in just with a broadcast spreader instead of having to get all my equipment down there, the discs or the tillers and the tractors or whatever it is, and all I need to take is a broadcast spreader and I can get this plot established, how awesome is that?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the difference between the two. Real quick, the positives and the negatives. What are the possible things? Obviously there's a lot of positives, and, with this type of frost seeding, there's a few more pitfalls than what there are with frost seeding an existing perennial plot.
Yeah. The way I look at it is, if it works, it's positive.
Yeah.
And I think in the same sense as traditional frost seeding, you're going to have some seed germinate. Now, if you have a thick sod base of a annual from the year before that it's going to be hard to get good seed to soil contact, maybe there'll be some issues there. But a good trampled down field that's bare dirt that's been eaten to the ground, I don't really see the drawbacks as much. Now, always preparing the ground for perennial is going to be your best bet. Just gives the root system an easier chance to get established. It's going to create a fuller crop. But if you want to get by with as minimal amount of work as you can, the drawbacks compared to the pros are really not that big of a difference.
Sure.
I don't think.
Yeah. The to me, and we hear it all the time, one of the biggest positives of this is we talk about soil health.
Yeah.
And the less you can disturb that soil, the better. So in essence, what you're doing is you're establishing a brand new food plot that has not been planted there. It's different than traditional frost seeding. You're establishing a brand new, and you're not going to have to touch it with a set of discs, a harrow, anything. You're going to go in there and you're going to simply broadcast seed. And when it works, there are no negatives to it. Everything is a positive.
Yeah.
You're saving that soil health. You're not having to get the equipment in.
You're also not, big thing is you're not turning up dormant weed seeds.
Yep.
That's one big plus for it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I always tell guys, when it comes, you get those, everybody wants everything to work all the time.
Yeah.
It's just how it is. And food plotting, you're going to realize, occasionally something's not going to work, and I tell guys, listen, you got to, if you get good seed soil contact, and the minimum, you're willing to go into this knowing, you know what, I'm willing to burn a bag of seed.
Yeah.
If this doesn't work, I'm not going to hold it against Whitetail Institute or anybody else. It wasn't the seed. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. But if you're willing to take that gamble and say, you know what, I'm willing, to take a bag of seed with all the positives that you can get from it. To me, it's absolutely worth it.
Exactly.
And anytime now, I have an annual that is set to be rotated. I frost seed it.
Yeah.
Instead of having to disc it and do that, that's exactly what I do every single time now with all my
look,
annual
if
plots.
it doesn't work, if it doesn't work well, disc it up and plant your establishing field the next time. Let it get you by, and then you can break the ground and start over from scratch. But it's worth a shot.
Yeah. And I say that to every guy. It's like, listen, you're here in the spring, give it a whirl. If it doesn't work, just like you said, disc it. You were gonna have to replant it anyway.
Exactly.
So the only thing you were out was a bag of seed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right, and that's the way I always looked at it. Was worst case scenario, this doesn't grow, and I'm replanting it in the fall.
Yeah, and any food plotting, and as I tell all the customers that call us, food plotting anytime is a gamble.
Yeah,
because you can't control the weather.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. So any food plotting is a gamble. So, put the odds in your favor and do it as best as you can, and you'll have a better outcome. But, that's just the same way with this frost seeding a perennial into last year's annual. There's a gamble. There's always going to be a gamble. And this is the better you prepare yourself with soil testing and stuff like that, the better chance you're going to have of a good crop.
Yeah, and we're going to talk extensively about soil testing and food plot maintenance here a little bit later in this podcast. But you're absolutely right. To me, I don't see any negatives. And there'll be guys like, hey, man, $30 is $30. I don't want to just throw a bag of seed. Okay, if that's not what you want to do, but I always look at it, it is absolutely worth it because what I can save and not having to disrupt that soil, bring up those dormant seeds, just my time and energy and effort.
Yep.
It's absolutely worth the gamble to me. So
I think it's a great practice.
And, we just did a show on this. You can watch the video. We had awesome success, and we've been doing it for the last 2 years. And I remember when I first went to Whitetail Institute and I was talking to Wilson and Steve, and they're like, man, I don't know, like, go ahead, because I'm reading more and more guys doing this online, and they're like, why don't you just go ahead and try it? But Wilson and Steve at Whitetail Institute, the awesome thing about Whitetail Institute is you guys want to tell guys to do things. You want guys to be successful.
Yeah. So
anytime there's something that, there's something that may not work, they're very apprehensive to tell a guy to, hey, because at the end of the day, a lot of times they get the blame for that, and they don't want that. They want guys to be successful. So, I went out the first year and did it, and we had great success. We did it in 3 different plots, and it worked in every single one of them.
Yep.
And I told Wilson and Steve, I'm like, hey, this works, and so then we videoed it and did a show this year, and it turned out phenomenal. Yeah. So if you're willing to burn that bag of seed, it is, in my opinion, 100% worth it.
Yeah, it's, I've been doing this for a long time, and just within the last couple of years have I started hearing about this.
Yeah.
It never even crossed my mind until I started hearing about it, but I think it's a great practice, and I think you've raised a lot of awareness for this practice. I think that's helped it come a long way.
It's the number one question. We're in that time right now, and it's one of the number one questions I get is frost seeding related, but more and more guys doing this, and I guess maybe we could touch on this now. A lot of guys think, okay, frost seeding, you're saying I can frost seed anything. And they think, man, I'm going to go out and throw some frost seed in frost seed this hayfield. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And I tell guys, I'm like, man, I've heard of guys saying it'll work, but I've heard of guys failing miserably. I personally have never tried that, but there's a lot of, I think, more things that can even go wrong in that, because you're not getting the seed soil contact a lot of times. That's key.
Yeah.
Is seed soil contact.
That practice is not one that I recommend, but people are going to do it.
Yeah.
Deer hunters want to plant where they can, and a lot of times they want to plant where it's easy.
Yeah.
Or it's, the only place they can plant.
Sure.
We have guys that, all they live in the middle of a hay pasture and they want a food plot, but the farmer that cuts the hay doesn't want them to disc anything.
Yeah.
So can we broadcast it on top of the ground? Well, yeah, you can. I'd say germination falls off drastically.
Yeah.
Because of seed to soil contact is the biggest issue.
Sure.
Now, if you wanted to include herbicides into that and the use of herbicides and spraying to kill a spot and then going, maybe it'd be a little different. But it's just not something that I recommend to our customers.
Sure.
But it's like you said with our company. We always want you to be in the best situation to have the best food plot. Yep. And telling you to go broadcast seed onto a thick sod base in a hayfield is not the best practice to get a food plot established. So you're going to call us in turn and say, well, that seed didn't grow. Well, yeah, it probably didn't because you've not given it a chance to germinate.
Sure.
So we don't really recommend it. If you want to do it like you say for the cost of a bag of seed.
Yeah.
Maybe you do get decent germination.
Yeah. And like I said, I've heard of more and more guys doing that and it working for them. So again, we say, hey, if you're willing to burn that bag of seed, but I will say when you have an annual plot from the year before, like a beets and greens or a ravish or whatever it is, and you have good soil then in the late winter, you're more successful more times than not.
Well, because you have exposed soil.
Exactly.
The deer have trampled the ground. They've eaten all the base of the sod. All the roughage is gone. You've got exposed dirt.
Yeah.
It in theory, it should work a lot better.
Yeah. When we came out with the last show I did on frost seeding, the topic we're talking about, frost seeding that annual plot, I had guys saying, well, yeah, you tilled it up. Oh, that wasn't me tilling. I didn't touch that. The deer.
Yeah.
It was a muddy mess.
You know? And that's what you want because you want that seed to soil contact.
Yeah.
That's key.
Yep, I agree. So let's talk a little bbit about what seeds and why. What can we frost seed with? When we're looking at doing this, and I know frost seeding an existing perennial plot, I look at it a little bit different, but I'll let you explain, kind of the way you look at it from a frost seeding of what seeds specifically can guys frost seed with and why they want to use those.
Yeah. Well, it's basically the same as frost seeding into an existing perennial, but to me, you want to up the rate just because you're trying to get a new field established off of an old field. So up the rate. But yeah, clover, fusion, chick magnet would probably be my top three. Then you could put extreme if you wanted to, but the edge and the alpha rack may work a little, but it's parts of the crops are going to work better than the others. But clover and fusion, just like you've had the best luck with,
sure.
we recommend those two more than anything.
Yeah.
And up the rate if you're trying to establish a new plot. So I'd say anywhere from a full planting at least to up to double the full planting.
Sure.
To just that way you're guaranteeing yourself to have the best germination possible.
Yeah. And I'll talk a little bit about seeding rate a little bit more, but to go back to what seed to frost seed, and again, I've been doing this for 2 years, so I don't have a ton of experience with it. But the way I look at this is you have even more things kind of working against you with frost seeding an existing annual plot than you do with a perennial plot. Like when you frost seed that, you're looking at filling in some bare spots and things like that. This, you're looking at establishing
a brand new
plot. And I just have had the best success with Imperial Clover and Fusion. Mm-hmm. And that's what I use to frost seed every single one of them. they've done very, very well for me. I'm not saying I just know Extreme's a little bit harder to get established.
It's not the top recommendation.
Yeah, you
Clover
can,
Fusion.
but Clover Fusion for you guys, like those would be my top 2 recommendations if you want to be successful, and that's what we want here. We want guys to go out and be successful. I would highly encourage you to start with those, and hopefully you have some success and say, hey, this is awesome. Then you might play with some other things, but when you first go out, those would be the 2 that I'd personally highly, highly recommend. Now let's talk a little bit, we're going to get into this now of seeding rate and things like that. Let's talk about, how we frost seed, what's the method, what we want to use, equipment needs, and then seeding rate.
Yeah. Only equipment you need is a hand spreader.
Yep.
And our Whitetail Institute, it's an Earthway 2750 model hand spreader. Works great because you can adjust the gate to the smallest size.
Sure.
And our seeds, as you know, are Clover and Fusion are the smallest seeds that I've probably ever planted. So you got to be careful with that. But yeah, a hand seeder is all you need. Seeding rate, there again, double it if you want to, or at least plant a full planting.
Sure.
A good point you made about frost seeding is do it early in the morning when the ground's hard, or late in the evening when the ground's hard. Don't do it in the muddy middle of the day.
Sure.
You know?
And you can do it in the middle of the day, but you're going to spin around. And I've personally experienced that when you're frost seeding 15 food plots, it gets old and your legs get tired in a hurry when you're out there spinning in the mud.
Yeah.
So,
and another thing, don't use an ATV spreader. Don't. We have customers call all the time. Well, can I put it in my big hopper and put it out? Well, you don't want to. You hit one bump with these little bitty seeds, and that gate bumps open a little bit.
Yeah.
You're dumping it all in one spot. A hand spreader is the only way to go when you're planting these perennial plots.
Sure. Yep. So just a seeding rate, and I'd say think of it this way: when I do a traditional frost seeding on an existing perennial plot, I usually do about the same amount it calls for a new planting. That may be overkill, and I get guys a lot of times ask me about seeding rate, and I say it really depends on what your plot looks like.
Exactly.
This is an existing perennial. So if you have an existing perennial plot that last year looked phenomenal at the end of the year, you may want to do 3/4 of the suggested rate. If it had a lot of bare spots and things like that, then you're probably going to do the full rate. The way I look at frost seeding and an annual plot from the previous season is you're establishing a whole new plot.
Brand new.
Your germination, you're not doing this the traditional way with disking it or tilling it. Your germination rate's probably not going to be quite as high.
Yeah.
So to me, what I've done with this is if it calls for a bag, I'm doing a bag and a half.
Yep.
Is usually what I'm doing on an annual plot, and that has been pretty successful for me. So that, and as far as equipment needs, again, we touched on that before. This is what's so appealing to this for a lot of guys, and myself included. If I don't have to take my disc and my tractor and get all that stuff in, and all I have to do is go in with a broadcast spreader, that is super appealing to me. I have a lot of food plots that are hard to get to. I showed you the property yesterday. I mean, the majority of our time, and Kyle, our producer, sitting here, the majority of our time when we're planting food plots is spent getting all the equipment to the plots. Yeah. I mean, we spend hours and hours and hours and hours. If all the food plots were lined up beside each other, we'd be done in no time. But just getting to all of them is brutal. So, I look at something like this, it's like, good grief, that's going to save me a lot of time. So,
and a lot of hunters are in the same situation you're in.
Yeah,
so
it's very similar. I know a lot of guys are the same situation that I'm in. And so for me, that's super appealing that all I need to take is a broadcast spreader.
Strap it on your shoulder and go.
And if that works, then I'm not taking the tractor and the tiller and the discs and all that equipment in. And that is super appealing. The other thing, I know guys out there, are hearing more and more about it is soil health. It's good to not have to disc and till your plot all the time.
Right.
It's better for the soil. It's like you mentioned earlier, those dormant seeds, you're not going to be stirring that stuff up.
Right.
So there's a lot of benefits to doing it this way. Next, let's talk about, we have to touch on this just because we get a lot of questions from these guys, frost seeding in the South.
Yeah.
And let's talk just briefly about that.
Yeah, it's really overseeding because the frost is limited in the South, but just the same principle. Just broadcast your perennial seeds. Clover and Fusion are good. But the problem you run into in the South is sandier soils. You don't really want to go with clover. You probably want to use Chick Magnet or Extreme if you want to overseed into sandy soils, just so they'll have a better chance to survive the hot, droughty summers. But yeah, just broadcast it up the rate, especially in sandy soils, up the rate even more. Another thing is critical in sandy soils is fertilizer. Make sure you fertilize in the sandy soils, all soils, but sandy soils especially because they leach.
Sure.
But yeah, just same principle. Just broadcast the perennial seed at a full planting or double the planting over the top of your last year's annual plot, and do it before rain. Let the rain put it in.
Sure. I don't think we talked about this earlier. If we did, I apologize because we've been doing so many food plot shows, so it's hard for me to keep straight. The one thing that we definitely talked about in the last frost seeding podcast, I think we need to touch on here is I'm a firm believer in the most important thing, if we want to call it frost seeding, is the seed to soil contact. And I have technically frost seeded when it was done freezing and thawing.
Yeah.
Because that's the action you want. That's what frost seeding is you're getting freezing and thawing, it's sucking those seeds in the ground. And I tell guys, I get emails all the time with the 7-day forecast. Is it too late for me? Is it too late? I don't see any freezing days. Can I still frost seed? And I always tell them, if you got good seed soil contact, get out there and
put it down.
Get out there and put it down.
Yeah.
And I've done it many times and been very, very successful. So I want to tell those guys, if you think maybe you missed your window of opportunity, you haven't. If you can get good, decent seed soil contact, get out there and put the seed down.
Sure.
I've been very successful with that. So I think to me that's more important than anything, than even with the freezing and thawing. I just get a ton of questions. Like I said, I get screenshots all the time, guys sending me 7-day forecasts, and they're freaking out because there's no freezing temperatures in there. And it's like, you should be all right. Get out there and put some seed down.
Get it down before the weeds and grasses start taking over.
Yep, I agree. So the last thing, we want to talk about here, and we talked about a lot in our last podcast, is just because you went out and you had a broadcast spread and you did it, your work's not done.
Right.
There's a lot of things then to making that food plot's going to be successful. We're going to talk about soil samples, liming and fertilizing, and then maintaining that plot with herbicides and mowing.
Yeah.
So let's start with, first of all, and honestly, we should probably start out all of our podcasts with these, but let's talk soil samples.
Yeah.
Because we preach it. You hear us talk about it all the time. I talk to people. You see it's like, hey, what should I plant my food plot? What's your soil sample say? So let's talk about, specific to frost seeding, why soil samples are important, when you want to do them, when you want to lime and fertilize, all that good stuff.
Well, the biggest thing is you're cutting corners already. Okay, so you're cutting corners by not having to get your machinery there, all your time doing that. So spend a little time getting your ground as good as you can. Sure. So soil sample first, and you want to, if you have an idea of what you want to plant the next year when you plant your annual. If you have an idea of what you want to frost seed into it in a perennial, go ahead and test it in the fall. And if your pH is low, go ahead and add that lime then.
Yeah.
And, put your annual in, let it go through the year. Now, if you can't and your pH is decent, put the lime down in the spring when you plant. But fertilize it as far as frost seeding into an annual once the perennial seeds that you have put down have germinated and they're growing, then you'll want to put your fertilizer down on top of the plants.
Sure.
When they're dry, and try to do it before rain. But soil sample as far in advance as you can is the way I like to look at it. But like we talked about earlier, most hunters don't want to fool with it in the wintertime.
Yeah.
It's a wet mess. Co-ops probably aren't going to bring buggies in to spread lime because they can't get in. So, if you need to wait till the spring, wait till the spring, but get the lime down as soon as in advance as you can.
Yep.
And make sure your pH is good. Make sure you add the fertilizer you need to add. That's the biggest thing. I mean, it's the most important part of it.
Sure. And I get a lot of emails from guys saying, is it too late? I didn't soil sample yet. I'm not going to get the lime down, because they understand, you need to, lime takes a while to take effect.
Yeah.
It's not going to be immediate. So, general rule of thumb is you get your soil sample and you try and get that lime down 3 or 4 months before you're going to plant. And like you had mentioned, and I'm going to be honest, I don't soil sample at the end of hunting season.
Right.
And I guess the main reason being, even when I get that back, I'm not going to want to take my equipment in there to spread it anyway. So I'm generally doing my soil samples here in the spring. And usually you got to understand that's already an established plot. Hopefully you bit the bullet and got that pH up, that your pH is going to be decent.
Yeah.
That you're going to be okay still to frost seed. But here there's an ideal way to do it, but yet there's a realistic way. Now, going forward, I'm going to make a better attempt to get my soil samples at the end of fall. And if I can get in there and try and get them limed and, limed, not fertilized, but have them limed and stuff so they're ready to go when I frost seed, is frost seeding for me is becoming a bigger part of my food plot management strategies. But yeah, like just realistically, we understand a lot of guys, just not in there in the hunting season. They're not going to go in and spread their lime. They're going to wait till the spring. But don't think all is lost if you haven't got that done.
Yeah,
yet.
no, definitely. If you're late, be late. Just put it on.
Yeah.
And there's limes. Pelletized lime will work faster. If you have to get a quick fix, ag lime doesn't work as fast. But definitely get the lime on. And if you have to get fertilizer. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You want your pH to be as good as you can, but you have to have fertilizer for this seed to do what it's supposed to do.
Sure. Yeah. And, we talked a little bit. Let's just talk about fertilizer, and because it can get super technical.
Yeah.
But it's just a question I get. And we've already established the fact when you're frost seeding, you want to put your fertilizer down once you see it start to green up. When you're doing a new planting, we talked about this. You want to put your fertilizer down the day you plant.
Yeah, with your seed.
And that's something that was new for me because I'd always heard, you can burn your seed. The old time farmers say, don't put it down the same day. And that's what I'm going to start doing. So I always put it down like a week before. But the way you explained it to me made a lot of sense. Is if you put that down a week before, all you're really doing is fertilizing the weeds.
That's all you're doing.
You're giving those weeds a head start. Whereas if you fertilize once you seed, and you've been doing it for years and never had it burn the seed or anything like that. So just when you're doing a new planting, fertilize when you're actually planting. But as far as frost seeding, you want to fertilize after it starts to green up.
Yeah, let it green up and fertilize it. And just the critical thing is make sure the plants are dry when you put the fertilizer down. Don't put fertilizer on wet plants.
Yeah.
So don't do it in the first thing in the morning when the dew's on. Wait till the afternoon, let it dry, put it on, let it rain.
Sure. And the next thing, let's just talk real quick, about your soil samples. You're going to get your soil sample back from Whitetail Institute. Personally, I love them because it makes a guy like me even able to understand them.
Yeah.
I can put down exactly what I want to plant. I'll usually put a perennial and an annual, just to see what they are. So I'll put, clover, and I'll put pure attraction. It's going to come back with the exact recommendations what I need for lime and fertilizer per acre. It's going to say, you need 100 pounds of 4600 per acre for pure attraction,
right.
So it lays it out. Now, what a lot of guys run into trouble with, and I did too when I first started, was, okay, it's calling for 100 pounds per acre of 4600, and I go to my co-op and they don't have 4600. They got, 360 or whatever it is, and they don't have exactly what I need. Well, don't panic. What we always tell guys is, okay, get as close as you can.
Close as possible.
Yeah, and I'll let you explain that a little bit of what those numbers mean and what it means when that number's higher and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so, if, like Jason said, if a soil test recommends 13, 13, 13, and you can find 12, 12, 12, just use it.
Yep.
Just use it in the same amount.
Yep.
You can actually go up a little bit, and there's room to move, but now if it recommends 20, 20, 20, and all you can get is 10, 10, 10, then that means you need to double your 10, 10, 10.
Correct.
All right. So the way fertilizer works is 100 pounds of bagged fertilizer gives you the nutrients that are on the bag. So 100 pounds of 20, 20, 20 gives you 20 pounds of nitrogen, 20 pounds of phosphorus, 20 pounds of potassium. So, a lot of people think if I get a 50-pound bag, that's 50 pounds, that's 20, 20, 20.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case. So you need to get 100 pounds to make it work. Well, So say you got to have 400 pounds of 20, 20, 20, okay? And 10, 10, 10 is half of that. So you need to double the 10, 10, 10, 800 pounds to make it 400 pounds of 20, 20, 20.
Right.
So those, and it goes way more in depth than that, and probably more than we want to get in on this. But if you have questions when you get your soil test, our 800 number's on there. You can call the office, talk to any of our guys. We can go through our soil test and tell you exactly. You tell us what you can get. We tell you how to use it the best way possible. And your co-op or whoever you're buying from may be able to tell you the same thing. But just like you said earlier, get as close as you possibly can.
Sure. And most co-ops, they can.
Yeah.
My co-op, they see me coming with my 20 soil samples, when I'm getting ready to plant, and they're like, oh, geez, they get out the calculator and start doing the math. But they can all help you, for the most part, get you pretty close.
Yeah.
And that's what you want.
That's what you need to be.
I do want to say real quick before we move on to spraying and mowing, I get a lot of comments and emails, and I'm just going to say this. There's a lot of guys out there that will say, just put down 13, 13, 13. That works for me every year. Just 20, 20, 20. That's going to work. All I would say is stop taking advice from those guys. Yeah. You just have no idea. Like we said, most of the times you're wasting money. Yeah. It's going to save you money by doing a $13 soil sample kit, and that is absolute fact. I don't care what anybody says.
No doubt.
I'll argue with them till I'm blue in the face that they're crazy when they're just saying, you don't have to spend that $13 on. Well, you're spending $400 extra on fertilizer you don't need.
That you don't need.
Yeah, and it drives me nuts.
And a lot of people will recommend, like, your farmer buddy tells you put 20, 20, 20 on. Well, in farming practices, that's been normal for decades.
Yep.
But you plant in a clover field, you don't need that much nitrogen in a clover field. So then when you plant it and you put down what he told you to put down, then you're dealing with weeds.
Yep.
And you're going to call us and, why are weeds growing in my field? Well, what'd you fertilize it with? Well, he told me 400 pounds of 20, 20, 20. Well, you didn't need that.
Yeah.
That $13 soil test would have told you.
Yeah.
And it's nothing that farmers, a lot of farmers know way more about planting than I do.
Sure.
But they're planting agricultural crops. These are specifically designed for deer. It's a total different ball game. So he's not wrong in what he's saying. You could use that, but you deal with the repercussions later.
Sure. And a lot of guys I see online that are saying that they're not even farmers. They're just guys planting food plots. And, some guy might be from the fertile Midwest of Illinois, and that works for him every year. But I say, you're talking to a dude that's from New Hampshire that has rocky soil and poor soil conditions, to tell him to just throw down 13, 13, 13, some of the worst advice you can give a guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just wasting his time and money. Get the $13 soil sample.
And nobody knows. A lot of customers will call them, well, my soil's got plenty of nitrogen. You don't know that.
Yeah.
Unless you've done a soil test in the year, you can't look at a piece of ground and tell me you know what's in that ground.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Yeah.
I mean, you could tell me if it's going to be good dirt.
Yeah.
But you can't look at it, and the guys will say, well, my pH has always been a 6.5. Well, no, it hadn't.
Yeah.
No, it hadn't. Very rarely, out of 100 soil tests that we do a day, if maybe 5 of them are 6.5.
Sure.
It's just very uncommon.
Yeah. So if all you listeners couldn't tell, we're pretty adamant about soil samples.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. And the last thing we want to finish up with and talk about, as far as maintaining those plots after you plant them, is two big ones. You're probably going to have to do both, especially with a technique like this, is spraying and mowing.
Yeah.
And spraying, especially because you got to figure, we didn't spray glyphosate and kill the weeds beforehand. So you're going to be fighting some weeds when this starts growing, especially with this frost seeding and, an existing annual plot from the year before. So talk a little bit about spraying and when we want to do it and how we want to use it.
And one reason you'll probably have more weeds is the germination is not going to be quite as full and without preparing the ground. But if you do happen to hit it right and have a good year, then weeds may not be that big of an issue. But we go in it looking like weeds are going to probably be an issue.
Yeah.
So mowing the tops out of the weeds is a good mechanical way to control weeds. The slay herbicide, depending on what time of the year and all that, but if you can spray the slay herbicide early, and if you start to see if your clover or fusion is up 4 inches and you start to see some weeds in there, go ahead and spray that slay and let it work two different ways, the way it's designed, through the plants up top, through the foliarly, or through the root uptake. So let it work both ways. So spray it early. The Rest Max, as soon as you see the grass, get on it early.
Yeah.
The younger the weeds and grass are, the more susceptible they are to the poison. So go ahead and get them early. And if you need to mix the herbicides, if you have a grass and a broadleaf weed problem, tank mix them.
Yeah.
Just make sure you use Surefire crop oil in there to make the herbicide stick to the plant. But get them early. That's the key to weed control.
Sure. And, I'll just full disclosure, 99% of my plots here in Northwest Pennsylvania, I get them early, and generally I spray the Arrest Max and Slay mixed together with the Surefire crop oil. Spray them early when I first start seeing, weeds and broadleaf and grasses and things like that. Then the rest of the year, the summer, I'm able to really maintain it with mowing.
Yeah.
And, I'm really successful with that method. I don't know that I've ever had to spray more. I know guys that have.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I've ever had to spray more than once.
Normally the people that have to spray more than once are people that let the weeds get too far in advance.
Sure.
Because perennial grasses, once they get established, are really hard to control. So multiple applications of a Rest Max give you your best option. So
Sure.
that's people that let it go too far. The earlier you get on it and stay on it, the better your field's going to be.
Sure.
And mowing, when you're mowing your field, let the weeds, if you see they're getting above your clover, then or fusion or whatever you have planted, just knock the tops out of the weeds and the tops out of your clover or fusion, and keep doing that. If it happens, some customers are leery of mowing too much.
Yep.
Don't be leery of that.
Yeah.
Mow the field if it needs it. It'll tell you if it does.
Yeah, and we're going to have a podcast coming up here in a couple weeks all about mowing and herbicides, and what to do in the spring and exactly how to use them. I will touch on the fact you get a lot of guys out there, you get guys that ask questions about the herbicides, the Arrest Max and the Slay, and there are generic brands out there that you can buy in bulk, and you'll get the, Whitetail Institute's ripping you off because, Whitetail Institute, we're not selling in bulk. We're selling to the guy that's doing, 2 acres of food plots.
Yeah.
He doesn't need 15 acres of spray, because here's the deal. You're going to buy that stuff in bulk, and if you only have 2 acres of spray, one is that's only going to last 2 years. The shelf life of that, herbicide is going to last you 2 years. Secondly, if you're in a cold condition, you better have temperature control to store it. Yeah. So are you going to bring that herbicide in your house, or do you have a garage that's temperature controlled? Because you're going to need it, because you're not going to be able to store that herbicide. So, we're catering to the guy that's planting, we're not selling it in bulk. And by all means, if you're, spraying 15 acres, then buy it in bulk. That makes sense. But for most guys, it doesn't. The biggest thing I'll say with purchasing herbicide from Whitetail Institute, the Rest Max, the Slay, the Surefire Crop Oil, the Surficin, is we have a full-time weed specialist that we pay full-time. And what's his name again?
Dr. Carroll Johnson.
Yeah, Dr. Carroll Johnson. He'll talk weeds to you till your head starts spinning.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows more. You send him a picture, and he's going to send you how to deal with that weed, what to do. Try and do that with another, company that you bought that herbicide in bulk from. You're not going to get that. No. So, there's a lot of guys out there that are super knowledgeable, and they know weeds, and they don't need that kind of support. And that's great. The guy doesn't need to use our stuff. But, the guy that's out there that's starting and doesn't know every weed in the world, and he wants that kind of support, that's what you're getting when you get with Whitetail Institute. And I just like to clarify that, because you see it a lot. So
you do.
If you're spraying in bulk, by all means, we encourage, go buy it in bulk. But if you're doing 2, 3, 4 acres, doesn't make sense,
right.
And if you're a newbie at this, you're going to want that support. You want to be able to call us and talk to us about weeds, and we're going to take our time, and we're going to spend a lot of time with you and help you through it. So
yeah, exactly.
So that's spraying and mowing. That's all I really had. Do you have anything else to?
I think that's covers it all.
The thing with me is this is fairly new. It's come around in 2 years, and I'm super excited about it. I'm going to do it every year. I'm going to do it with every annual plot that's set to rotate. I encourage guys. We've been really, really successful. It is, on our end at Whitetail Institute, we want everybody to be successful every time. So it makes us a little nervous, because we know there's a lot of variables with this. But at the end of the day, we've been really successful with it so far, and we encourage guys to try it. So frost seeding those annual plots that are set for rotation is a very effective method.
It is.
All right. Well, I appreciate you being here with us. It's getting about lunchtime. We have Brandon here from Alabama, and we're going to go. We're trying to introduce him to all the local flavors here in Northwest Pennsylvania. What'd you have last night? A ham wedgie?
I did.
It's pretty good, wasn't it?
Very good.
Yeah. Today we're taking him. He's never had a pizza burger before, so we're heading to the local bar, Max. I'll give those guys a shout out. And we're going to introduce him to a pizza burger here for lunch. So, but we appreciate you being here and talking us through all this. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you like it, make sure you subscribe. We're doing 7 podcasts in the spring with all spring-related topics. We're going to be doing 7 more in the fall with everything fall-related, planting food plots. So pretty excited about it. Being going to be a great resource, whether you're new, old, I think you're going to get something from it. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.